one of our most common video requests has been how to process the bodywork. This is a car that's actually an all-aluminum body car that we're in the home stretches of finishing. And basically the evolution of the bodywork would be, if you're starting from a bare metal platform, you're going to do your etch prime or an epoxy to protect that steel, or aluminum in this case, and then you're going to do your bodywork above that. And then from there, you're going to put, this is how we do it anyway, you put another round of an epoxy on there to seal that work in. Because the reason we do that is because body fillers and primers tend to be somewhat porous. In other words, they will absorb moisture. And paint doesn't have enough what's called holdout on it to protect the metal from that process. So you've probably seen it before where a car has been freshly painted, and then a couple months or a year later you start to see the paint bubble because rust is underneath it. It's because the metal has never been sealed against the moisture barrier. So the way we do things is when we start with a raw platform, meaning a bare steel, or in this case a bare aluminum car, we put in an etch primer or an epoxy primer depending on what the circumstances are. We do our body work over that, and then we will put what's called an epoxy sealer over the top of that. That encapsulates that work. And that is basically us telling ourselves that we're not going to break through that we're done with the process at that point. Once we have done that, we put what's called a wet-on-wet application. In other words, while that epoxy sealer is still on the surface of wet, we will put what's called a surfacer on top of that, which you probably know more as a primer, a sandable primer. So in this case, we always try to make them in two different colors so we know where our stopping point is. Johnny's getting ready to block onto this car, and this is kind of a skilled work area. This isn't something that as a novice you really want to do unless you have a good understanding of what it is you're trying to achieve. And it takes a wide variety of tools to have large success with this. Because this car is going to be a very dark metallic blue, it means the bodywork has to be absolutely straight as can be. Aluminum panels tend to be somewhat wavy, and anytime you form fit them to a car, that waviness gets increased. So it takes quite a bit of gentle handwork to make that work. In this case though, going back to what we have here, right now we have a black surfacer on this. Your ideal objective is when it's all said and done, you would like to see almost all the surfacer gone other than any slight low spots. What you honestly would prefer, you start seeing where Johnny started some of his work, you see the white coming through. That's the sealer that's underneath this. The primary objective is to not break through the sealer, but to level off the surfacer as much as possible, because more millage of paint you have on a car is not good. It makes the durability of the paint less. You want a minimal amount of millage because it's more durable and it'll last longer. More amount of filler and primers and paints that are on a car, the stuff eventually always shrinks back and it opens up the pores and the paint starts to fail. So objectively, we don't want this black on here. We want it to be almost as white as can be when it's all said and done, because again, the epoxy underneath this is white. So we consider this kind of like our warning track. We don't want to go past that. So we're going to go into time-lapse photography here. You're going to see this whole process. You're going to see Johnny do a couple of things that are imperative to maintaining a quality style line with the GTV. And we will annotate that in note form on the bottom of the screen so you have an understanding of what it is he's doing. You got anything to add, Johnny?
Nope. Pretty much just hit it all. We'll tape off our style lines, and we'll start with a coarse grit to get the panel flat, and then we'll go down to a finer grit, and an even finer grit after that, and we'll use a variety of tools, multiple blocks. I've got 2 blocks here that have 2 different grits. Another one here that's a little bit longer. The longer block, and the even longest block that right now has 36 grit, but we'll switch that out for 320. And with the variety of blocks, we'll just keep getting the panel straighter and straighter and straighter, like you were saying, without cutting through the primers that we have on here, so it looks prime.
So Johnny, what sandpapers are you going to use?
I'm gonna start with 180 grit, and that's gonna be a very, very light. This is 80 right now, so I'll switch that out for 180, which is this here. We scuff that up really, really quickly because the top of the primer tends to get hard, and it likes to sand off into little balls. And so we want to get that cut really, really quickly just to get the panel straight. And then we will go up to a 320 grit and finer grits after that to get the sand scratches out. And when we go to 320, we're no longer blocking to get the panel straight. We're still blocking with flat blocks, and it's still getting the panel straight. But at that point, we're actually taking out the more coarse scratches and into a finer scratch, so that when we seal this car and we're ready for the base coat, those sealers are designed to cover that grit of scratch.
What John is referring to is mechanical linking. There's two different ways to apply wet materials onto the car. It's called the wet-on-wet application, which means, for example, the white sealer that was on here, we applied the black surfacer over the top of it while it was still wet. Those two items will link into one another. That's called a wet-on-wet application. But if the paint, or in this case a primer, cures out, you can't put something directly on top of it. It won't bond. It'll fail. So you have to create what's called a mechanical linking. And that's what Johnny's doing here. He is starting out with papers, rougher coarse paper, in this case being 180. That cuts down the general flaws in the surface. And then each progression in grit above that is to kind of fine tune it. Almost like honing the edge of a knife is effectively what he's trying to do. It's critical, especially on darker color cars, that you do this by hand. Because if you were to do this with a machine, when it's all said and done, this car's painted, you're going to see little waves in the panel. Okay, that's called a machine action. Okay, we can't do that in a restoration process. The car is here because it's not supposed to be something that's normally achieved anywhere. It has to be something that's above that. So this is part of the job that takes a lot of skill and a lot of patience. It has to be done by hand. And Johnny's going to show you how that process is. Brad, and as I had said before, that I was going to loop back around on our headers and the technology that goes into them, and then we were going to share some information with you from Brad on why we ceramic coat all our headers. And Brad's going to bring us up on what that technology is all about and explain to you why some of you keep repairing your headers. There's probably a reason behind it. Brad?
Thank you, Darren. The main focus of why this header coating was designed, why it was brought to market, was to reduce radiant heat, to stop the penetration of heat into your metal that your headers are made of, and to prevent the cracking. You can reduce the radiant heat by hundreds of degrees if you don't let the metal get as hot by coating the inside. There's a ceramic fret, a liquid ceramic fret within all of these coatings. They may look great, they may give you the colors you're looking for and all those things, but with the ceramics that are within these, it doesn't matter if it's black or it's silver, it's only going to radiate a minimum amount of temperature because of the amount of ceramic within the coating. Many of you may have talked with other ceramic coating companies and they say, no, we only coat the outside. Well, if there was only one surface we were going to coat here at Performance Coatings, it would be just the inside, because that's where the heat is, that's where your corrosive gases are, that's where the damage is being done that's causing your headers to fail. An additional benefit of coating your headers is you hold it at a constant temperature. A temperature within the inside of your header is closer to the temperature of the gases approaching it. So hot air travels to hot air faster than when it runs into a cold. Just like the weather, you get hot air running into cold air, you end up with tornadoes. Well, hot air to hot air, it just flows smoothly, and you get more spent gases out of every combustion cycle in your engine. So the next intake charge is a cooler, cleaner environment for an explosion where you're going to see more power per explosion. In fact, let me take you outside in the shop and show you how we do these things.
Headers here are waiting to be coated. They've been blasted with aluminum oxide. They're perfectly clean. You can lick them, they're so clean. They won't be touched by bare hands again until they come out of the polishers. He's going to apply the coatings right back here at the paint booth. You're going to see a strange green color on these. That's the start of the polished aluminum look. The finish is over here. This green coating is going to air dry white. We're going to throw it in the oven over here overnight, 500 degrees for 4 hours. Then we're going to take those parts and we're going to take them back behind these doors and put them through vibratory polishing process. And after about 45 minutes in one of those machines, they'll actually come out of there looking like polished aluminum. The end result of all the steps along the way. You get a highly polished, almost chrome looking, depending on how smooth your metal is. Ceramic coating reduces radiant heat. This is good up to 1300 degrees here, and the limiting factor is the fact that it has aluminum powder in it. Aluminum oxidizes at 1350 degrees, so you can't exceed that or you change the structure of the aluminum.
Start time to delivery.
Turnaround time, you mean, or?
Well, no, how much labor does it take to get from there to there?
Well, we're going to blast this part. When you bring your parts into me, we're going to blast them twice. We're going to take your surface and get whatever's on there off in a separate blasting step to the step that brings us over here to the coating process. We're going to take it down to bare metal inside and out. Then we're going to clean the part. reblast the part with 100 grit aluminum oxide to get the surface perfectly clean, then apply the coating, cure it out, put it through the polishing process, rinse and dry it, inspect it, touch up any areas that have been rubbed against the walls through the polishing process. We could have as much as 5 or 6 hours into your set of headers from start to finish. The black parts you see are actually going to come out of the oven black. They're done once they're cured. It's only the Chromex, the white parts you see, that need to be put through the vibratory polishing process. If you want to come behind these doors, I'll show you those machines. These are our small polishers if you have small parts. And these are ceramic beads called microbright. 3, 4, and 6 millimeter ceramic balls that through a vibratory polishing process mixed with water and polishing soap bring that coating to a beautiful shine. Here's our large polisher here. You can see on this header he just finished coating. As it's air drying, it's turning from the green to the white. You don't put them in to expose them to heat until they've gone completely white.
When they come out of the oven, they're still white.
Right, they stay white through the process until we put them through the vibratory polishers and remove all that chalky white to expose the polished aluminum look. There are 2 exceptions to the products we apply that don't need to go through the oven and cure. These are the shiny aluminum. This may look white to you, but it's a shiny aluminum ceramic header coating. And another one we call black velvet. They both hold about a 10% shine gloss quality to them, and the only way to maintain that after you've exposed them to heat is to let them slowly release their volatiles and air cure. It takes 5 days of air curing before you can expose them to your engine heat, but after that they're going to stay looking just like this and reducing radiant heat.
I'm sure all of you are aware of powder coating, and you probably are assimilating this to powder coating. The only thing they have in common is the word coating and an oven. Powder coating is melted plastic, melted at a fairly low temperature, and will not again exceed that temperature and survive. It has no other properties other than for appearance. Our coating, although it has appearance qualities, is meant for reducing radiant heat and extending the life of the metal parts. We have many customers where they see brake failure, where they see high temperatures in their fuel to where they're boiling their gas. This eliminates, in many cases, eliminates those issues on those cars, because the heat radiating off the exhaust is your only source of heat under that hood, and it's cooking it.
I'd like to thank Brad and his guys over at Performance Coatings for sharing a little bit of what they do with us yesterday and kind of giving you a good understanding of not only how labor intensive it is to ceramic coat something, but the benefits of ceramic coating. Keep in mind, ceramic coating is an ideal way of keeping heat down on your headers. Wrapping your headers is always a bad idea. I've never found a valid reason why you should do that. That's old technology. It's dangerous technology. Bottom line, if you wrap your headers, you're going to change the overall dynamics of the metal. Cracks happen because the metal is getting fatigued, meaning it expands and contracts at a rate that is so outside of what the metal is meant to do that it has to stress release, so it cracks. When you wrap a header, you're thermal trapping the heat inside. So now not only does the header heat up, not only does the header heat up at a faster rate than you want it to, but it doesn't cool down in a very efficient way either. So the metal becomes tempered, and effectively what happens is the header will crack, and over time the metal becomes so fatigued you can actually shatter it just like it was glass. That's tempering of the steel, and it's a bad idea. That's why we never ever wrap headers. Anyway, Brad and the guys have a great system over there. Ceramic coating has been proven time and time again. What Brad didn't share with you is there's just a ton of race teams that send their product through to get ceramic coated. I don't know if it really elevates their horsepower and the performance as much as, you know, one thing from another. But what it does do is it allows some of these race teams, especially those who are on somewhat of a budget, to continuously reuse their headers throughout the season. You've seen people fantasize headers in the sense that they'll use these beautiful butt welds and no lapping anywhere, and those headers tend to crack. The reason they crack is because where that weld is, that is a different strength of steel than the adjacent sides to it. That is what we call an F1 style header. It's all fine and well, but there is an F1 team out there on this planet that reuses their headers. When they're done with that race, those headers are done. They're not meant to be there for long periods of time. They're designed by track. And so the bottom line is, unless you have F1 money, you really should consider whether you want just to have a raw metal header. It should be coated. It should be ceramic coated. Your car will thank you, your feet will thank you, and overall longevity, your wallet will thank you. Just food for thought. Okay, so we're here on yet another Saturday, enjoying our quiet time, if you will. And I just want to show you a little bit of the progress of what it was that Johnny was dealing with. And I want to show you a few tech tips that might help you through if you're going to try to do this stuff on your own. As you can see, most of the black is almost completely removed from this. And again, the black is a surfacer. Effectively, it's just like a slightly thick primer, like most primers are. And it's meant to just kind of level off the surface of the car. In this case, what you can see is almost all the black is gone in this perimeter. Okay, and what you have exposing now is the white sealer underneath it. And remember, it's always a good idea to do these in two different steps, meaning, you know, one coat completely different color than the other, because it helps you understand how far you're cutting into the system. The other thing you may have seen Johnny do on the time-lapse photography is he was using tape. We use a tape to do a couple of things, and here's something you should look at if you're thinking about buying a GTV and you don't have one right now. Pay attention to the style lines. If the car has a minimal amount of paint millage on it, these style lines should be reasonably sharp. Not too sharp, but fairly sharp. We tend to keep them really sharp during the process, because when we get to paint, by the time we do the paint, or I should say, by the time we do the sealer, the base coat, and the clear coat, there's effectively going to be somewhere in the area of 6, if not 7 coats of paint at that very moment in time. So this is going to go from very sharp to slightly rounded. Paint typically does not hang on to a corner or an edge very well. It tends to want to pull away from there because by gravity alone. So if you're looking at a car and you're thinking about buying one, pay attention to the style lines. That's a good indicator how much paint or filler work has been done on that car. If it's really rounded off, odds are that car is exceptionally heavy on layers of something underneath that top coat of paint. But I'm going to show you what we were doing so you get a better understanding of it. So I have this set up this way. In other words, I'm below the style line. That would mean that I'm trying to cut everything up here. And using this tape to protect the style line, okay, I'm just going to pull it off right here for now. So we would normally pull this tape all the way across the car. Now on a GTV, this is a very tricky thing to do because that line is not supposed to be straight, okay? It's supposed to have somewhat rising curve to it, and somewhere about 2/3 down on the door, it's just start to deflect going back down towards the front end. And not to mention, it's also curved out. So it's a double curve style line. It has a slight pitch up and a slight pitch around on it. So if you were to look at this car from top, it's not straight from front to rear. It's curved away around. We bring that tape up to this point because we're going to cut down this way on our sanding block, and that keeps that edge really, really sharp. Okay, if I was going to work this panel, this tape needs to be taken off and reapplied to the top because I'm cutting up to the style line. Okay, that's really going to help you maintain a very crisp edge, and it makes a huge difference in the end results. Okay, so there's a technical tip I want to make sure you understood. Also, when you use tape to control the style line, don't stop just at a panel. That's a big no-no. Pull it all the way from front to rear, okay? The reason you're going to do that is if you were just to pull that line for the panel itself, and then you pulled another line for the door, and another line for the front, you're never going to get that curvature that you're supposed to have. Okay, so pull the tape the whole length from front to rear. Buy several rolls of this because you don't want to try to reapply the tape, because once it's on that surface, it's going to get full of any sanding dust and it's not going to stick. And the worst thing in the world can happen is you're sitting there cutting that with your block and that tape moves on you. All of a sudden your line's going to do this number. Okay, so there you go.